This is New England Soccer Weekly with Tom Quinlan, Nick Giuliano, and Mike DeSilva on 790 The Score.
Strap in, boys and girls.
Oh, boy.
A little new set today.
Yeah. Things are a little bit different.
A little new optics.
To us, it looks
We have
green.
a guest. There's four of us now. We're all cozy here on the
Yahoo
table.
Sports comes in the building. We step up.
Yeah, we got
That's what happens.
The team gets eliminated last night, so let's try some new show ideas as we head into the offseason. Why not?
That's it.
Welcome into New England Soccer Weekly,
It's the
boys
only
and
way
girls.
we know how. It's the only way we know how.
Andy Deossa from Yahoo Sports. Welcome in
person.
studio.
First ever in-person studio guest, correct?
Yes. Mike, Nick, guys, how are you?
I'm doing great. Mike, how are you?
I'm great. Andy, how are you?
I feel good, man. Timing couldn't be more perfect. I mean, I don't know if perfect's the right word, but you know.
Well, you're
I'm
here for
man.
the chaos
Yeah,
today.
yeah.
I want you to just. Do you have earplugs? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm ready.
We're
I'm
already
ready.
seeing Tom's levels like bounce
Just
like
absolutely
crazy.
through the roof.
Yeah.
How today, after everything that you've been through as a New England Revolution fan, it is so emblematic that game ends like that last night with horrible coaching decisions down the stretch. This is the beginning of a new era for your New England Revolution, and you know what? Better now to just rip the Band-Aid off and focus on what matters, and that's actually getting the right people, plural, in here. Because this team somehow, and Clint PA couldn't explain it last night when I tried to bring it up with him, went from second in the league to middle of the pack in the Eastern Conference. And you get bounced out on a Wednesday night at Gillette Stadium, barely in front of everybody, which actually sounded pretty good for 15,000 people.
Yeah, no,
I will say that.
I'm not going to lie.
It was a loud 15,000.
But that's not
TV,
the
it
types
came
of crowd
across
that you were
pretty well.
putting in pre-Bruce getting knocked out. This is not necessarily going to be a defensive Bruce all day. But do you think if Bruce is in there last night, you lose 1-0 at home to Philadelphia in that one? And again, those guys, I thought after the first 45 minutes, I said on Twitter, after the first 15 minutes, you were going to know whether or not this team was going to be up for the fight to try to push for a Game 3. And for about 45 minutes, they did that. Didn't really get many shots on net. Philadelphia didn't get really many shots on net either. Both teams went into half with no shots on net. But at least you went in 0-0, or you were going in 0-0, and then the Mark Anthony K thing happens, and then we eventually get to the catastrophe. So, and then the Omar comments. I'll get to those separately in a minute because that game.
Let's talk about the game,
Yeah,
yeah.
I think the game itself. That's a game you should have won last night.
They were, in my opinion, the better team pretty much for the full 90.
It comes down to coaching decisions. That's simply game management.
And we talked about it for
And
the last
mental
few
mistakes.
weeks. The mental lapses. And again, the free kick. And honestly, it was crazy. I was in the process of texting Nick, I don't like this. Just because of where that dead ball was, it just seemed dangerous. It seemed like they've had too many opportunities because I think at that point they had 15 shots and only one on target. You knew eventually they were going to put one on target. And in that dangerous position, I did not like the feeling of it. And sure enough, all it took was a simple little flick. In that inside of the 6, you cannot allow them to be first to the ball. And it was a mental lapse. It was just being a half a step too slow, a really lazy challenge by Chankalai. And there you go. That is the game right there. And it's unfortunate because I thought that they played really well.
I do think they were the better of the team, but again, that doesn't matter. And one moment where Tomas Chocolai has a mental lapse, the player is running away from the
It's
goal.
just an unnecessary
you can't make a
challenge,
foul
man.
there. And then after that, the ensuing kick, the entire team is misplaced.
Half
no
a
one's
step-
in the right
half a
position.
step slow.
They have Carlos Heel in a one-man wall,
Which is insane.
in that position. But again, this is what happens, and this is soccer, and that's it at the end of the
I
day.
think the one-man wall, you're down a man too, right? So you're trying to get as many guys
True,
in the
but
box there to
when you
try
go back
to.
and watch it, I mean, it was a great free kick by Philadelphia. You have to give them credit.
Oh, it was
They
a
put
perfect
they
ball.
I mean, Andy, you had a great vantage point where we were in the press box. It was a perfect free kick in that situation. You can't give them that opportunity. That's what it comes down to.
The thing about it, like playoff games, is a lot of times it gets sloppy, and those are the moments that define them, right? Like I think the Revs did play well yesterday, but it's because they had to push the game. And I think Clint said some of that after the game, like the Union didn't have to force the issue, so they were fine, kind of sitting back and seeing what they could do in transition. And when they were in
a lot of
transition-
pressure in that first half.
Exactly, and to the Revs' disadvantage, they were just crossing the ball into the area and not getting anything out of it. But when the game gets sloppy, when the pressure gets on, and after everything they've endured this season, I think that was kind of the frustrations boiling over at the end, and that's unfortunately how it unfolded.
And it's a tough spot too, because being up a guy, if you're Philadelphia, they know that when you're going to PKs, they have the advantage with Andre Blake and goal as well. So you compound that with all the Revolution was dealing with up until that point. It was a tough night last night. It was a rough loss.
I hate penalties. We've all been very vocal about that. I think it's just a weird way to determine, especially in a playoff.
This whole process is weird, though. The whole thing is weird.
But the penalty kicks would at least would have removed the disadvantage of being man down. That removes that, unless Mark Anthony Kaye is taking a penalty kick and you're depending on him, the man down doesn't affect you any further if it goes to penalties. So to see that goal come so late when you played so well, you had some chances, but like Andy said, a lot of their chances weren't really that threatening. And I mean, Andrew Farrell, we used to always talk about Brandon Bye playing in so many balls from the wing that were just going nowhere. And Farrell worked his ass off. Like, don't get me wrong, he worked hard, but nothing that he put in the box besides his own shots really were threatening.
But he was putting the chances in. I didn't hate what you got from the wings last night. I think the problem comes down to your top three offensive performers. Heel, Chenkalai, Bo did nothing in that first 45 minutes, despite the fact you're saying, hold on,
nothing. But
okay, you had two total shots in the first half, opposed to Philly's 11. Meanwhile, you had the ball 63% of the time in that first half. And don't tell me that possession stats. No, it comes down to the fact that you have the ball that long, you have Philly press back as far as they were, and all you can do is get two shots off in 45 minutes.
The problem is you saw what they were allowing them to do. They were making them beat them wide. So that's why their game plan, they were packed in. They were forcing Carlos Heel and Chenkalai as wanting to be creative in the middle of the field. They had nowhere to go. They had to play the ball wide where Andrew was by himself the whole game.
And that's why, to Mike's point, that those aerial balls in just weren't working because Philly was scheming for that the entire time.
And who are you depending on in the box on those crosses?
Well, but create havoc in the box. Create something in the box.
Well, you can't if it's not there.
Who's going to do it?
Try to get something on net. You know what? I agree. Philly
their game plan was to shut down those guys up top, and that's what they did.
But at the same time, too, it's not like you weren't having. It's not like you were having problems encroaching the 18. Philly just packed in the box, and for some reason, you didn't feel confident enough to take one on net. That's not what I expect from Tomas Chenkalai, who has probably one of the harder shots in the league.
And I have a good question for Andy here because he watches about as much MLS as anybody in the country. When you see a team like that, where that has these creators up top, that number 10, those wingers that are dynamic, is this typical of a team to you make a decision to shut those guys down, force them wide, and having to play the ball in? Because it seems like that was Philly's game plan, and they kind of executed it properly.
I think, and this is probably a conversation we'll have more throughout the show, it comes down to coaching. I think that game plan should not have fooled anybody. I think Jim Curtin's we're going on the road. This is, not going to be an easy task, but this is what we're going to present. And if it doesn't work, then we'll go and try something else. It's ironic to say this, but crossing the ball against Philly is probably not the best idea. Given the way MLS Cup ended last year, you might think differently, but Gareth Bale wasn't on the pitch in Foxborough yesterday.
You had no Wagner out there last night, right?
Sure. So, you still have a solid defensive line. And my thing is, once again, if you're going to cross the ball, which I'm fine with the strategy because of what the game presented, have it be effective. And like you're saying, Chenkalai, Hill, they have room to roam, but to me, Gustavo Bo is just not effective enough in certain games, and that's ultimately to me the downfall of how the offense can move. Because if you're crossing the ball and nobody's there, who's getting at the end?
But don't you want those guys to take guys on one-on-one? Don't you want to see a Gustavo Bo, especially when he has the ball at his feet, which he had the ball on his feet a lot?
But it's tough to do that when you have 4 or 5 players.
But go after guys.
But that was what Philly was trying to prevent, and that's why it was so difficult to do that last night. Why do you think, again, when you're watching the game where we watched it and you see everything, why do you think the flanks were so open the whole time? That's the point. Yeah. Because that's what Philly wanted to do. And in order to break that, you have to do what you just said, try to take someone on one-on-one, or the only times that the Revolution really had really positive scoring opportunities was a ball in that went to Bo's feet, and then Andrew Farrell taking a guy on and trying to shoot it himself. Everything else
Well, he
kind of was
surprised
all
everybody with that
everything
one.
was all for naught.
And that one counterattack that I think you forget about because it was so early on. And it's like, if you're able to convert that, that's a 1-0 in the beginning of the game. Now you're talking about a different, because Jim Curtin at that point might say, okay, we got caught on the counter. Let's see if we could change this dynamic.
Which one are you talking about?
Mark
the one?
Anthony Case.
Yeah, Mark Anthony Case.
He
that
just
was
lost
tough.
his legs, man. You could see it, and especially on the replay when they showed the front-facing angle, like he was gassed. Like he barely
he
got to that
made
ball.
a sprint. It was a good sprint to get there. And that's not the typical play for Mark Anthony Case.
We'll get to K in a larger conversation in a second here, but I thought the other thing too that stuck out to me in that first half was, and it goes back to comments that Polster was making during the week about, well, maybe we got to start going at their players more, being more aggressive with their players because of trying to protect Carlos. Polster was kind of foreshadowing what he thought could have been a really physical matchup, and I thought that was for the first couple of minutes. The referee really didn't have too much control, and I thought that's something that I thought they kind of took their foot off the pedal with, is trying to beat up Philly a little bit. Like, I kind of like that aggression because you want to set the tone at home. Don't F with us.
Yeah.
Well, that can only go for so long, too.
But it also, you were not getting calls really to go your way. You got a few fouls here and there, but Philly was getting away with a lot of hands. Especially in the back.
Referee was terrible last night.
My God, I'm drawing a blank. The central defender who got the yellow card early.
Damian Lowe. Damian Lowe.
Yeah, he, the thing is, if you're going to give a direct red on Mark Anthony K, right, that, I think we can all agree, you can make the argument that was definitely a red, right? Stomped down. But now, if you don't want this game to get out of hand and you've already given somebody a warning, a yellow card is supposed to be like, you don't have another chance. That's what a yellow card is for. And now you go down towards this, in the second half, and he's literally pulling him back, preventing him from counterattacking, and you don't give him another yellow card. To me, that's determining the game right there.
Again, I'm not a referee, but that's a moment where you do make the game even, and it's a warranted play. That to me I think he overthought it there in that moment. He was lost the entire game.
To him, I think the referee just got in his own head. He lost control of the game, especially at the end. What a mess that was, and the fact that they only added not even a full minute of extra time. When, there was so much confusion, he was calling players over, talking to them, the ball's out of bounds. He reversed a throw and called it his linesman made. And it's like, what is this guy doing at the end of this game? You completely wasted 2.5 minutes of the extra time. And that doesn't even include all of the other calls you missed early on that could have controlled this game. So that was so frustrating to see, man.
But still, at the end of the day, I think you did have, you can't say this team and you could be as critical as you want of the ref. That team was not ambitious enough last night, your Revolution, to try to create some type of shot opportunity. Yes, you're going to tell me about packing it in, whatever. At the end of the day, still doesn't matter to me. I thought that was a team that was going to play with desperation, and you know what? By any means necessary, try to find one in the back end in that against a vulnerable Andre Blake. Of all years to beat Andre Blake, this is the year to do it. He's not the same guy that he was when he came in 2014. He's not 2015. God, he's been around forever. 8 years now. He's not the same goalkeeper. And you've seen it through games this year. This was not the same Philadelphia team that has been the crown jewel of the Eastern Conference the last several years. They probably get bounced out of the next round by Cincinnati. Sure. Lock it.
Yeah.
And we talked about that before the game. We talked about the way these two teams were playing, we kind of didn't know what to expect. But I think Philly has been vulnerable this whole year, and they had the same stretch they always do. They just kind of go coast, and then they have the last part of the season where like, okay, we're back. But this is not the team that has that punch to me. And Jim Curtin's still there, and the team is still talented. But to that point of like playing with the desperation, the only player I saw that from was Andrew Farrell. Like you could tell he was.
Yes.
This is the game. We need to make it happen, and it's unfortunate that doesn't translate across the board. But that once again, to me, it all stems back to the larger conversation of confidence, of coaching, of everything that's been surrounding them, how everything unfolded.
And I not that I would like to go back at you in this moment, but it's difficult now after the sound that you're going to hear later in the show. It was very telling after the game, and I think that player that you'll hear from probably speaks for a lot of people in that locker room.
Well, yeah.
I do just, as we, kind of.
But I do want to go through the red card because I want to get everyone.
Well, yeah, we get up to that right here. Yeah, so yeah.
Yeah, the red card, I think, kind of changed the mentality of the team completely, as it should. You're going down a man. You have to shift your mentality and your tactics, really, because you're either making yourself vulnerable in the back.
Goal in the first game, too.
Exactly.
With that Jacob
you're either
Jackson
making yourself vulnerable in the back, or you're losing that attacking, oomph that they needed. And I think that is what suffered the most. Although they fell back into what Philly wanted them to do. They were forcing them wide. They were giving Andrew Farrell all the time in the world. But one person that maybe I just missed it, but I felt like I didn't see enough of was DeJuan Jones. I felt like DeJuan Jones did not get involved in the attack.
You think they were giving Farrell more
I think
space,
absolutely.
and that's why yeah.
If you look at it, anytime they reset, that ball always went out to Farrell. It was very rare, and even some of the runs that DeJuan Jones made were into the box seemed like desperate times where they were kind of in tight spots.
The second half, I could definitely agree with that. The second half, DeJuan definitely had
I don't
less
think you
touches.
saw them off regardless. But
First half, I thought he...
No.
What a...
All right, we'll get there. We'll get there.
First half, I thought DeJuan had more touches. It came down to the fact that he's going to get you down in the field. It's not his job to put the ball in the box and finish it for you. His job is to,
it's kind of been the role he's been playing.
Yeah,
but he's setting up Carlos. He's moving around. He is trying to create some type of space. His role, but also too, he's there.
He's a player that, to your point earlier, that I would like to have seen that more from last night. I mean, he's got the speed. He's got the.
But you don't want to get countered on, right?
Well, I mean,
Farrell was making the same runs.
Okay, so what do you want then? Do you want them to try to go all at it and score and be aggressive? Or,
Well,
I mean, this is what it is.
But this is what you're.
It's the last
This
game
is where
of the
you
season.
expect Carlos Heel, the allegedly one of the best players in the league, to take
not
over.
alleged. That's
Why
a
are you
fact.
allegedly? Why would you do that?
That's a fact.
Why do you do? Well, no. Why do you do that every week? What's the point?
Listen,
You have a point. You're doing this for a reason. So why do you do that? Because it's almost like you're denigrating one of the best players in the league when you say that.
I think that you would have hoped that he would have given you more last night. I don't think he's given you the Carlos Heel type of effort that earned him MVP in 2021.
I don't think the effort is
I think
the
it's
correct
dropped
word.
off for him, and I think it's fair to say that it's dropped off for a lot of guys. And you know what? What happened with Bruce left a bad taste in a lot of people's mouth. We'll get there. Let's get to the Mark Anthony K red card though. So happens right in the 44th minute, right before we go into the break. I mean, again, I thought going in 0-0 at the break, yeah, you haven't had a shot on net yet, but Philadelphia still, hasn't put one in the back of the net. You've let up a goal in the first half of every game pretty much since, I think Seth said like the last 5 games. And then out of nowhere, Mark Anthony K, what I thought was just trying to jump over Gadzag, stomps on Daniel Gadzag and earns himself a red card after video assistant referee reviews it. Again, to me, watching the video, I thought Anthony K's momentum was just taking him to a place where when his foot landed, it made it look like a stomp. But everybody from Taylor Twellman to Matt Doyle to Andrew Wiebe to your local
Danny Higginbotham
to your local Twitter troll said it was no doubt a red card. Rojo.
Well, that's what when you asked me in the press box, I said that
you were quick to go red.
And the reason is for a few things, right? I mean, obviously, this is my opinion. The VAR slow down video makes it look much worse, which is always a difficult thing. But
Correct.
My overarching point is that you can't give a referee the opportunity to even make that call. When you step over a player and the motion looks like you're stepping down with your cleats on, more often than not, regardless of if you're a fan or not, that's going to be called a red card across sports. This is what soccer has come to with the video assistant referee replay. Excuse me. When you see it like that, you give the referee an opportunity to go. Was it a harsh red? Yes, but that's why I said this is the way it's going to go, because that's what you saw.
Yeah, I mean, and this is where it's all subjective, and I think that, the referee, it's their discretion, right? They review it. There's no, standard protocol that says, yep, this is exactly what happened. This is exactly the referee still could have made a decision to not give him a red
It was a pretty quick review.
It was a pretty quick review, and, obviously, as somebody who follows primarily the Revolution, I have a different opinion on it. I think that, to me, too many times, situations like that, the person instigating the situation gets away with nothing. Could he, did he exaggerate the role a little bit and kind of linger on the ground and force him into that position where he's stepping over him? That's the way I look at it. I look at it from a different perspective. You got to hold both people accountable there. If that's a direct red, it's at least a yellow card for being on the floor, instigating the situation. People may disagree with me on that, but that's how I would determine it as.
So both guys deserves card. Even if
I
you're going to
think
give
both
Anthony
people are
K a
at fault.
card, I think Gadzag is also at fault, right? Is that what you're saying?
To me, anytime you're instigating
It's
somebody,
never going to get called like that.
It's-
I hear what you're saying, though. It's never going to get called like that.
I mean, they're trying to push all of this they don't want taunting, they don't want all this extra stuff. Then you got to call it both ways. You got to say, okay, well, you're also instigating, rolling around on the ground, faking an injury. As soon as a red card comes out, all of a sudden you're fine. To me, that they're not, soccer players in general just aren't held accountable for that stuff enough. Like, you got to nip that in the bud right away.
But
Andy, what do you think?
Yeah, I don't think it was a red card. I try to watch the replay over and over, and I think my one thing was the angle that we got wasn't good. I think there had to be another angle to get a better look at it. But in that position, what Mike is saying, Gadzag is kind of trying. I think he willingly knew he was doing it. He could have rolled one way, he rolled the other way. And granted, these are things that happen in seconds, and it unfolds the way it does. But there's a moment that he sticks his leg up and also kind of puts his arm up. And K, everybody's like, he could have just stepped over. But I think when you're on 1 foot off balance and also thinking like the ball is still in play, which is the part that people are not talking about. Like his intention was to go to the ball. It might have just been a reflex. It might have been a reaction. I don't think it was a. People are saying, yeah, he stomped, and the way it looked, I don't think it was a stomp either. I think it was more kind of like a reflect, like a kickback and trying to go for the ball. So everybody talks about the moment, and I get it because of the dynamic of the game, because of it's a 3-game series. It's right before halftime. It's the subjectiveness of like seeing the play, and there's people that say it's a clear red, and there's people that are like, there's no way this is red, and I think that. You could see it both ways, but I personally, watching it this morning, still don't think.
I think it was harsh, but again, when I saw it, and when you give the opportunity for the referee to make a call like that, that's what's going to happen more often than not.
The angle wasn't enough for me. The angle wasn't enough. That's just a point. Like, you talk about in football, they're reviewing a turnover or something. It has to be inconclusive. How can you determine where his foot even landed? You don't even. His foot disappears. You don't even know if it hit.
I'll go back to my point again, guys, and I'm not saying you're wrong, but if it went on for 5 minutes and you're looking at him, but it seemed pretty clear. He walked over, he heard something in his ear, he watched it and made the call. It was very quick.
Well, I think he made a lot of wrong calls throughout the night, so I'm not shocked that he messed that one up too.
The refereeing has been awful these playoffs. Yeah. Go look at the Cincinnati Red Bull series. Vancouver LAFC is the most egregious one of them all. With Vancouver getting absolutely.
Were you there for that one?
Nah, that was up in Canada.
That was
gotcha.
was up in BC Park. Or is it BC Place? BC Place. Probably. I mean, I don't think you'll see a worse moment with pro referees this year.
That one was crazy. That one you won't hear. I will not defend that one.
So,
subjectiveness, man. It's just you're leaving it up to dudes that. And well, not just dudes, females, everybody, referees alike. They just sometimes they try to take control of the game at the wrong times. It's like you're already losing control. Now you're trying to overcompensate. I'm not speaking necessarily on the K red card. Just throughout the game, it's like there was no consistency.
Boom! That's the word I was waiting for.
There was no consistency in his
that's
call.
That's all that you want in a referee. Is consistency. That's it.
That goes back to this. If you watch the Cincinnati Red Bull game, it kind of reminds me. Actually, the first half of that Cincinnati Red Bull game reminds me a little bit of the start of last night's Revs and Philadelphia game, where both teams are going to start beating the crap out of each other. They're going 100 miles an hour. They're playing. They're playing aggressive. They're playing to hurt somebody. So and both of those refs, in whether it be game 2 of Cincinnati, New York, or last night in game 2 of Red Bulls or Revs and Philly, is that there's no consistency, and those guys just don't know how to take control.
Well, you go back to game 1,
better refs in that moment.
And I'm not saying, I know it's a different game, different referee, and I'm not saying it was a red card, but the foul on Carlos Heel, which doesn't get anything, you look back at that and you say, how is that no card? And then how is the Mark Anthony K one a straight red card? I can see why people would be upset. I get it.
And to me, not to lean too far into it, because it's hard to tell this live or on video review, but intent plays a part, right? I think Philly very clearly had a motive in game 1.
Absolutely.
Like, we're going to fling these guys around. You can't tell intent from that Mark Anthony K play, but to me, like I said, it seems like a reactionary moment. It seems like something that happened. And 2, for me, for refs, and I've always said this my whole life, when you know referees' names and just know them, that's already a bad sign.
Yeah.
You should not know refs'
Mark
names.
Geiger.
There, Drew Fisher, you have Pencil, you have these refs in MLS that you just hear of every other week, and that's just not a good sign across the board. You think about refs in other leagues, do you hear people pointing them out? No, I mean, things happen, of course, but I feel like with pro, it happens a little too much, and I don't want to pile on the refs, but it's part of the game.
So then let's move on to the second half now. So they come out of the break in the second half. You're down 10 men to start right from the jump at the 45. And I'll tell you what, from the 45th minute up until the goal, you were completely in that game.
All my notes are Revolution based. They played very well for being a man down in that situation. You're right, up until the goal.
Barely outshot 6-8. Yeah, you both teams split 3 shots on net apiece. You controlled the possession, even being down a man, which is, fascinating. So Philadelphia was willing to absorb all that pressure last night. Just couldn't finish. And then, as you're continuing to apply that pressure, and as you're continuing to maybe either go ahead one or
you could have been down. By the way, that ball that went off you had 2 posts,
post shots,
too.
yeah.
So it could
one nice save by Earl Edwards.
Sure, help by the
you
post.
had a-
Thank you, post.
You had a couple of
there was one in the
close
first
calls.
half too. So
Yeah.
again, we can't. It's not all that.
And I also I've always found it so strange that shots that hit the post don't count as a shot on
Yeah,
target.
because I said that last night. Tom was like, they don't have a shot.
between the posts, but like to me, it's like you hit the post. That's
Pretty
it's a
close.
target.
It's the same thing in hockey too, though.
Same
They don't.
thing.
Yeah,
It's weird.
But through that second half, let me ask you this: before they actually make their first sub in the 82nd minutes, the Revs, would you have made a sub earlier in that second 45?
Yes, I definitely would have.
Who would you have taken out?
You probably. I don't take out Gustavo Bo. I don't care what he wasn't doing on the field.
Right.
This could be potentially maybe even his last game with the Revolution.
Can we pause for a sec?
Yes.
So the Revolution go down 1-0.
Yes.
And the next move is to bring off
Gustavo Bo.
entire-
I'm going to get there. I'm going to get there.
Okay.
Who?
I have an answer.
Yeah,
I
that's
think
it.
Boateng should have been the first sub on the field.
Absolutely.
Boateng's skill set is literally cross the ball. Like there's a player that the Union are telling you this is what we want you to do, and the Revs were doing it. If you have a player of that caliber on the bench, that literally is one of the things he's really known for, and he could also he could provide if he's in the area in those scrambles.
In
Why
case
not
of
throw him in
emergency,
there?
break glass for Ema.
Absolutely.
That was the saying that
That's-
we've had.
He's done it his whole MLS career. That was baffling to me that first sub wasn't Boateng.
And he comes on in the 90th
comes
minute.
in at the end, like,
he
you know,
comes on in the
89th.
89th minute, whatever. He had maybe 2 minutes of run out there after Carlos beats the hell out of Imbazio. Just a disgrace that you don't bring on a guy that has literally saved your bacon in the past in a playoff game when you needed an equalizing goal.
Why? Tommy Mack's not the answer?
And then,
Stop, we gotta
the
keep-
most
we gotta keep
egregious
Tom.
mistake of them all. And this is the sign that Clint can't return anywhere near the first team. None of the people on that bench deserve to return to the first team either. Tob, see ya. Good luck wherever you go next. Marcelo Santos, go back to the academy. I don't even know if Kevin Hitchcock belongs there anymore. How in God's name do you take out the most clutch player for this franchise in the playoffs in the Bruce Arena era? 2021.
Not the Bruce Arena
2020.
era anymore.
2020.
Playing devil's advocate.
Extra time versus Montreal. Who gets you the game winner? At home, Gustavo Bo. In Orlando, on the road, you need your stars to show up to get to the Eastern Conference Finals. Who gets you there? Gustavo Bo. When Carlos goes down with his injury, who puts the team on their back, dude? Gustavo freaking Bo. And with this being probably the last ride for Gustavo in New England, you take him out when you're down 1-0. I said it was over when this team lost K after that red card, and maybe you still had a chance, and maybe I was wrong at that, but you were 100% dead in the water when you take out Gustavo. And I'll say it again, Brian Bolello, save your job now and clear out everybody in that coaching staff. And possibly in the front office too, because that is an indictment of how bad that is a pure moment to define how bad things are with whatever regime is running things right now.
Hey, quick aside, Andy, you've been in press boxes across the country, correct?
Yes, correct.
Have you ever heard anyone as loud as Tom through the 90 minutes of a game?
I don't know.
Loud, stop.
Yeah, I don't know if I've heard, and I don't think I've heard as much live commentary in the press box. But I'm appreciative of it because
It's a different scene.
it is, and it's also I feel like it's also necessary because it's part of the conversation, and it's also great that the Rev staff is there and they're hearing this too, because not that they have I guess, jurisdiction of what calls are made, but they're well aware of the situation, and I think that that's part of the equation as well.
Don't make up lies. I'm not loud in the press box where everybody's
vocal. I think vocal is a good word.
Vocal.
What he said is right. It's not. Most press boxes are kind of lame. It sounds like a library. Everybody's in there. Everybody's in their little laptops typing away.
I
was just asking a question.
It's a little bit different up here. We have a little bit more of a relaxed atmosphere. Whatever. Media contingency is fun up here, and we get answers when we need to. But,
can I ask a question real quick?
Yeah.
Do you remember when we had Alexi Lawless on a few weeks back?
Yes.
And he laughed at me when I said, would Clint even want this job? Because I'll tell you one thing. It didn't look like he wanted the job last night.
You're not
wanted it from the beginning.
Yeah. And Alexi was like laughing at me like, haha, what do you want a job in the ML? Like, to me, it doesn't seem like he's wanted it. It seems like it got thrown on
that
him.
That move was, and I don't like criticizing. That's not my thing. That move was wild.
Go back to the K red card. The K red card happens, and Mark is showing more emotion than
Andy. Andy said that in the press box.
I just don't like that. PA's just standing there.
He's just standing there. Say something. Say something,
anything. Man. Like, react. Just standing there.
Actually,
not cool.
Correct me if I'm wrong though. In the press conference, wasn't it a pretty passive answer? He was like, "Yeah, he stomped on him, and that's what you do."
I'll give you the exact quote.
But I get a red card if you stomp on somebody.
Yeah, you're liable to get a red card when you stomp on somebody. Not, you know what? It could have gone both ways. But you know what? You could have seen that kind of laissez-faire, like everything's cool. It's 75 and sunny in November. It doesn't matter. I go back to my cozy academy job when he couldn't even tell you what the hell happened. This team.
He wanted nothing to do with that.
He just wants to get the hell out of there. He doesn't want that job. Who could blame him?
This was my post-game thought. Literally, I tweeted, I was like, the person that's probably happiest that this season is over is Clint. Like, I think
100%.
from the beginning, his comments of coaching professionals compared to coaching academy players, like, I think he was well-spoken early on that he was kind of in over his head, and he was just there to kind of fulfill whatever they needed him to.
And it's funny because not to bring this back to my conversation or our conversation with Alexi, but I would like to make myself now 2-0 against him because a few years back when he said that Carlos Hill was not the MVP, I said he's out of his mind, and he was. He did become the MVP, and now
didn't he say not top 5?
He said he's not a top 5.
Yeah.
He doesn't think he scores enough goals. He determines his MVP candidates based on the goals they score, which is just outrageous, but whatever. And I said it from the beginning. I said even if the Revolution were to go on to be successful, it's not what Clint built. He is there because he was told to be there.
He's a caretaker.
It's not a position he wanted, and we find out from a player last night with the conversation Tom had with a player on the team. He doesn't even know if he was the one making the calls. So we're going to get to that in a little bit, too, because that was a very interesting comment.
The other thing, too, is and again, I don't want to hear anything. I don't want to hear a damn word from anybody this offseason about Giacomo Vrioni coming back here and maybe doing something next year.
I think that's done.
That experiment is over.
You're not going to even get that from me.
Yeah, no, I think
he's gone. He doesn't even see the field.
He was showing some emotion last night on the sideline, though. I saw
probably more than Clint, right?
Yeah, definitely. Actually, yes. He was actually at least standing up. And
the dead people in St. Anne's showed more life than Clint last night.
By the way, there is a possibility he does return here for next year.
Well, he's under contract, but from what I've heard from people is that he wants out. He wants to transfer out.
How could you not want out? You got brought in here to play, and he hasn't been given an
back
opportunity
on
to
the
play
field since the temper tantrums.
Well, give you some little this.
Ooh.
No, nobody really knows about.
Oh.
Whoever put together the Giacomo Vrioni deal also has very close ties to the George A. Petrovic deal. Why? George A. Petrovic and Giacomo Vrioni are represented by the same agency. So after the Revs got Petro, they were fed Vrioni. And somebody had to go convince Bruce
sold a bag of goods
that they should go out there and get Vrioni. When really, we're helping out our agent friends.
Telling me Chelsea did not want Giacomo Vrioni? We couldn't have packaged that together.
I am telling you that
they needed a ball boy
affirmatively. So
you want him on Chelsea, Mike?
So the reason you ended up with Giacomo Vrioni here is because him and George A are represented by the same agents, and whoever that agent was talking to was able to convince the Revs to bring in both of those guys. I'm happy you at least got one. You know what?
There was some scouting involvement, though.
No. I'll tell you
This
for a
wasn't
fact.
just a
the
simple,
Revs
like,
never watched Vrioni once in person. They only heard about him through the phone. I can tell that for a fact. They did not scout Vrioni once in person. They scouted Books in person. They never scouted Vrioni in person. Period.
That's tough.
Interesting.
That might explain a lot.
That does. It seems like it has.
And you know what? So goodbye. See ya. Gotta go.
Maybe.
Done.
Well, let's get to the sound because I
Finito.
think the sound actually helps your argument even more.
Well, no, I'm not done yet. I'm not done
Oh,
yet.
yeah. Oh, boy.
Then
We only have an hour.
So you take out
Go
Gustavo
off,
Bo.
King.
Then you take out Andrew Farrell.
Yeah.
You take out the guy that literally was producing you he was. The soccer gods were speaking last night. The soccer gods wanted Andrew Farrell to score. If not, if he was going to score, he was creating for you. He was
working.
doing
It would have
what I
been a
was
nice
looking for you to
moment
do
for
in
him
the first
after
half.
getting that goal taken away earlier this year. If he was able to put one in at home, that would have been such a deserved moment for him.
By the way, two really nice shots that he took. I mean,
Very much so.
that first one was a rip. Great save by Blake. The second one, he
Just
had
on
him
the
beat.
outside. There were people
He
in the
had him
press
beat,
box
though.
that thought it was in. People
Well,
were.
'cause, yeah, the
It looked.
angle.
It looked good, but
He had him beat like that. Blake was not. If he tucks that slightly inside of that post, the ball was past him.
Yeah, how many times on my notes do I have Farrell in two consecutive
listen,
shots?
I
on
was
goal?
impressed with Andrew. I think he looked really comfortable down that wing, and maybe they were giving it to him slightly. They weren't pressing him as hard out there, but he was getting involved, man. He wasn't just sitting back sending in lazy balls. They weren't very productive.
But he was trying to create something in the box.
He had a few really good runs inside the box where I'm like, okay, tech, you're getting techie in there.
And other guys that you could have taken out in that moment, take out Noel Buck. Take out Matt Polster.
Yeah.
Buck first.
Polster, no.
Buck first. Yes.
Buck
would have
first, yes.
It's weird that all three of us had the same answer to your question, but my first sub would have been Buck out and Ema in. I agree with both of you guys. It actually seemed pretty easy. It seems like it was right in front of him to be able to do that. But.
So, terrible game management. Nobody, and you know what?
That came down to game management at the end.
You know what? And you know what it was too.
Well, yeah, and at that point, why not just put every offensive player out there?
You have no.
You have
that's
nothing
the
to
only,
lose.
That's it.
You have
That's
two
it.
subs left.
I thought. I know. Whatever. But I thought Wood, Veroni, just bring them all out. What do you got? It's
You have
1-0.
nothing to
It's
lose
already
at that
done.
point.
Yeah.
Nothing to lose.
And
then you see Tommy Mack. No disrespect, stand there. Everyone was like, "What is going on
Replacing
right now?"
Gustavo freaking Bo.
Yeah.
Again, a guy that has carried you when you needed him the most during fall
I would have
soccer
pulled
outside
Kessler
of
out of the
2021.
bat. Like
Kessler was my pick.
You bring in Veroni, you bring in Wood, you bring in Ema, and you just go. You got to
I
have a
love
shot.
Kess.
You got
Kess-
10 minutes.
Kess is
Season's over.
I love what he does back there. He's a steady defender, but he doesn't mind getting in the mud. You know what I mean? Like he'll talk, he'll get in there, he'll get physical.
And that was nothing against. I mean,
No,
Kessler played great, but you got someone's got to come
I
off.
think he's
Yeah.
the choice
Yeah,
because
yeah.
you're not taking Romney out of there. Romney, that's your backbone. That's your guy. He's the center of your defense. He does not move. Farrell's playing well. DeJuan Jones is dynamic and can create in a second. That's your three. You run three in the back, okay, and then you allow Jones to navigate up a little bit further. Maybe you drop Polster back a little bit. You take Buck out for Ema. And now you're getting some chances. Now you got Jones and Ema. You got Chonkalai,
You got Bo.
Bo. I mean,
Maybe Wood, maybe
that
Veroni.
is your
Bring 'em out.
That is your best chance.
Bring him out. Bring him out.
Bring him out, Ti. That is your best chance right there. If you want it, you bring in Tommy Mack. No disrespect, been a great Revolution player for the last few years.
It's not a shot at him.
Not the guy you need to go to in that moment. I'm sorry, it's just not.
I'd like to hear. I would love in a vacuum Tommy Mack when he got his number called. I would be like, "What?
Well,
Me
he's a
right now?"
He's a professional, maybe internally.
Yeah, but
he's-
you're at that point it's a different game. It's 1-0. The season's over. There's 11 minutes
That's
left. I don't know if that's
crazy.
the move.
Well,
Crazy.
this leads us in nicely about talking about right moves, and this leads us nicely into Omar. Before we get into Omar, notice what changed last night. You had a different keeper in net.
Yeah,
Which is also wild in the
that-
playoffs. Back and forth.
Earl
No
Edwards-
consistency.
Earl Edwards Jr. plays his first game since early October when the Revs lost at home midweek to Columbus. And from what I've heard from multiple sources, it was the players who told Clint, you're starting Earl tomorrow night versus Philadelphia. And Clint
Clint.
goes, okay. And that's how we got Earl Edwards Jr.
I feel a little
net.
bit bad for Clint though. Like we gotta feel bad for Clint. Like it's not his fault.
But you should know not to put Jacob Jackson in net. And then I have people spinning.
That's a man at the end of a relationship that's just like,
yeah,
just do whatever you want.
It's
like,
one of
you
your
know what?
boys that you know is
You're gonna
just down
go
bad.
Go ahead.
But-
it's just like
But
What are you gonna do?
the spin that I was getting from some people yesterday
He's
about
still
like
with her. That's what's gonna happen. Tough.
the spin that I'm getting about, oh, Jacob Jackson's a better athlete long term. He's a great shot stopper. Doesn't matter when you're playing against Philadelphia in the playoffs and he's a rookie.
experience.
That's not the place to go give him experience.
No. I'm saying you need experience. In
Yeah,
that
you need
moment.
experience in
you
that
need-
moment, yeah.
we talked
Okay.
about this last week. Lori Lindsay disagreed with us. She said that at that point, like it would have been weirder for them to go from the last game of the season, not starting Earl to then starting him first game of the playoffs. But then it makes it even more strange when then you decide to not start him in game 2. You're either going to roll with him or you're not.
I disagree because I disagree with that her stance. I'm not saying that,
Yes,
but
we did too.
It's just the fact to me is it's the playoffs, right? And everything gets elevated in the playoffs, and
Play your
things
best
change.
players.
You play your best players. I've talked to coaches around the league that have made decisions that have gone right, have gone wrong, and that's what the coach is supposed to do. That's their job, to take those risks. To me, when Clint, once again, the comments that he's made since he's taken over has told you everything you need to know. He's talking about the competition. It's a coaching carousel. You're not trying to hear that after losing perhaps one of the best keepers in the league and then going into a situation where you technically are still alive in a game that you didn't have to show out. You just had to win. It could have been in regulation. It could have been in penalties. But why do you not think that, I could automatically, I have to keep this afloat and I can't switch? It doesn't make any sense. And it goes again to the point of the subs that he made. It's like Nick is saying, the season's over. What are you worrying about somebody counterattacking you? What are you worrying? Like, you have to go all out. You have to put it out there. And I think that his approach from the time that he got shoved into the situation has never been that. It just never, to me, it's never been the Revs on the front foot. To me, it's always been the Revs trying to stay afloat.
Reactionary.
Well, speaking of reactionary, let's just get to the Omar thing now. So I've got my take on it. And by the way,
Sorry.
we'll
Steve,
go,
our director,
We're
is
getting
over
the
there.
producer
Yeah,
ready.
the producer. He's
Yeah.
getting ready to press some
Director,
buttons.
producer,
We have one
maybe
camera
editor
shot,
this
so
week.
it's
We
like-
don't know.
He
We
does
don't
it
know.
all.
I would say there's a good amount of people out there that know what the story is. And people are going to start talking. And we kind of previewed that a couple of weeks ago with Whiteboard Tommy, talking about who is going to...
Legend.
Yeah, whiteboard Tommy. That's gonna be
Don't say that, Andy.
a popular Halloween costume next year. Whiteboard Tommy.
You've got the Rev side of things, which probably is just going to end up being Richie and Kurt's side of things. We'll see. And then you have Team Bruce Arena's side of things, which apparently Omar's on Team Bruce Arena, if you couldn't tell after last night's commentary. I don't expect people to stay very quiet for long. Keep in mind, no NDAs were signed. Everybody's allowed to talk freely. Season's over. I think people shut up. Not because
Respect for
they
others.
were scared, but
and
they
you're still in season. You're
Yeah.
still the job is to win. That's what the job is at that point. But to your point, you said to wait much longer. It was instantaneous after the game.
I thought maybe a week. You let it. You let the wound heal a little bit.
when you get texts like that from me late night like that, I was like, get that sound. We need it tomorrow.
And listen, you guys. Full transparency. This isn't a topic that you guys really want to get into.
well, now that the season's over, I mean, this is part of the story. We have to talk about it.
It can't be ignored, and now it's being brought to the forefront. And
Well, we've known about it. Let's break down the fourth
for
wall
us,
for a week.
I know that we're doing this. For us, it's different to react to sound from somebody than to just espouse on things
Yeah.
that we don't really know. But we know what Omar Gonzalez told you, Seth, and Sam last night, so that we can react.
Can you
to.
paint the picture for us? Because to me, it seems like you guys were just the four of you just chilling. I don't know, like outside of the locker room or wherever it may be. Can you paint that picture before we play the audio?
Well, maybe he might not want to. He might not want to.
You guys go out for drinks.
Microphone.
I'm trying to figure out the way. Thank you. Figure out the way to properly and accurately tell this.
It was a cold Wednesday night at Gillette Stadium.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, seriously. I feel like we're about to get into some like.
I got the sense. I'll put it like this.
Can we put a chimney behind us, Steve?
Oh
Please?
yeah.
The Yule log,
I'm gonna
please.
add that for sure. You'll log.
I got the sense that Omar wanted to talk last night. There was my spidey Tommy senses were tingling. And my Spidey Tommy senses looked over at Seth and Sam Minton, Seth Maycomer and Sam Minton from the Bent Musket, now the Blazing Musket, and said, I think we should go over and talk to Omar. It seems like it should be something that we do. And Seth led off the interview. And obviously, Omar has a very close relationship before coming here to New England with Bruce Arena. So if there's anybody that's going to be able to talk about what the hell happened in 2023 and how this all went to hell in a handbasket, well, you might as well talk to one of Bruce's guys. Steve, let's play clip 1 here. Where did it go wrong?
Like, you've been around for a long time. You've seen lots of different things. This has been a turbulent season. Like, in your mind, where did things go wrong? What happened to kind of go from a team that's doing so well to what we have now?
Yeah, I think it's pretty apparent that the turning point in our season was someone on Bruce's staff, and just scratch that. The turning point of the season was when Bruce got put on leave, and then for those 8 weeks it was in limbo, and we were actually doing all right for those 8 weeks. But then once the official resignation happened, I think that's when it fell apart, and there was no real leadership in the front. And from my experience, when the front office is in shambles, it trickles down to the team, and you lose that confidence with the group, that cohesiveness with the group, because if you want a winning team, you need a winning organization. That's from my experience. When the front office is doing well and the team's doing well, it just feels good. And so once that started to shatter, once that shattered, you could tell how quickly things started to go downhill from there.
So let's be honest about who he's talking about here. He's talking about Richie Williams. He's talking about Kurt.
Well, he did an old lawyer trick. Again, not a lawyer. Your brother is. But that's where you say something and then you withdraw.
Wait, scratch that.
Before it's even over.
Off the record, on the record.
Strike
Love
that
it.
from the record.
Well, it's not strike. You can't strike it from the record. You said it in front of a bunch of reporters' microphones, but he's alluding to
that's
it.
why I'm saying it's a
Very
lawyer
well
trick.
played,
Like,
very well played.
Withdraw.
Yeah.
But it's already out
AKA
there.
like,
Everybody heard it already.
Whoopsie.
But you know what? We already kind of had an idea about it. This affirms it. And now it makes you go back to the Bolello Analfo press conference and wonder why anybody feels bad for Richie. Is Richie a whistleblower? Is Richie a victim? Nobody said anything in there. They've kind of just left Richie hanging out to dry. He's hanging out on the payroll. And then you have all these different voices that are trying to incorporate themselves in this team. What is going on? Why did we get to that point? Why was there so much dysfunction? Why couldn't we just keep the system? What was wrong with the system? Or was the problem that the system was run by one guy and people didn't like the system being run by one guy? It was a dictatorship. It was not a democracy. Sorry.
And that's what it seems like at this point. There's a lot of confusion. And what really concerns me is that Omar is a veteran in not just this league and other leagues as well for the national team. He's been around a really long time. And he's earned the right to be able to speak candidly about these things. And to me, how confused he was about and how honest he was about, like, hey, this is a front office issues, and that trickles down. We make we have the conversations, behind closed doors or on, on our show, or we write about it. We make our speculations because we try to understand, like, does this affect the players? He came out and straight up told you it does.
And again, and when we're doing this week after week, and Andy, you're writing week after week, we're going on what you see on the field, and you want to believe that these guys can step up, try to go against all the adversity that's happening, band together. You have veteran guys, and that narrative at that point, I think, was true. But then you hear this, and you see where the season started to go downhill and the play started to deteriorate, and it kind of does paint the picture that clearly it got to these guys, and it's been a problem since.
Yeah, and I think that was the concern from the beginning. I think that I'll bring my LA into this, being close to the Galaxy this season and how things unfolded over there with the front office. Every player was just like, don't ask us about this. We don't, like, Greg Vinny had to answer every question because of the situation was unfolding, and it was a front office thing until they finally fired Chris Klein. And after that happened, the players were like, "Yes, this is awful." Greg Vanney was like, "Yes, this is awful." There's certain coaches in MLS that get a lot of power, and Bruce is clearly at the top of that list. Greg Vanney is one of those at the top of that list. When the system is the system and it was working, like you said, some people might not like that, but oh well, the results are there, right? And I think that sure, they sustained for a little bit while it was happening, but it was a mess from the beginning. The way it was handled, and that's always going to affect the players at the end because they're the ones that have to go out there. They have to talk to media. They may not answer. They might not want to even be there.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, it's hard for you to try to focus when you know something's happening in the back and they're not handling it.
And as a player too, and you're going to hear this throughout the sound. You even heard it in that first clip right there too. You're looking for direction from someone, and when there's multiple voices telling you multiple different things, speaking of formation, speaking of players on the field, the coaching, like that does compound as a player. You don't know who to listen to after a while.
Well, the thing to me is like, okay, Omar's saying we had too many voices speaking, but you know whose voices weren't speaking? Dave Vandenberg's and Shalrie Joseph's. Where did those guys go? And were those guys not reading out of the same script as maybe Kurt and Richie and Clint? Guys that were going to go along to get along? Think about that for a second. Because the wheels are spinning now. Like, how are you supposed to tell me that, Dave and Shalrie weren't going to just disregard whatever was being said from up top with Kurt? They would have. They would have said, go to hell. We're keeping the same system with Bruce. And that was a problem. And they needed to get rid of that. And they did. The problem was the coup didn't work out completely because Richie went down with both of them.
Well, and just to play devil's advocate of sorts, even though it doesn't need to happen, you can't really go back at what Tom just said, because when the coaching staff changed, everything else changed. So if everything was similar, then I would say, what do you mean by that? But because the coaching situation happened, and then immediately you see different players out there, different formations, a whole different look to the team, it's difficult to say that that's wrong.
And this is where I will die.
Oh. You
on the
way
hill.
Too much of a dramatic pause. That's going to be made into a meme.
I will die on the hill that the Petrovic thing was a complete foobar. But we'll get to that. Cut number 2. Explain to me what the front office issues are, Omar Gonzalez.
Where were the problems in the front office?
I don't know. Whoever went to the league, I guess. I mean,
did it need to be this way?
Did it need to be this way? I mean, I really don't know what happened, so I don't know. But like for me, I think we have an HR department, I believe, and so maybe it could have handled within our own HR department. But from my understanding, it was skipped and taken straight to the league. So, I mean, in my experience, in my career, I've seen things handled in-house, and things don't leave the club, and you handle things, and you air your grievance if something's bothering you to the guy who's doing it, or some help with someone, and you get stuff handled, and the team can go on and become stronger for it. But the way this was handled, it was interesting. I mean, because I don't really know what happened, but the team suffered because of it.
Yeah, let's get that out of their heads. All the guys know what's going on. They have a united front. They don't want to get involved. They're going to let Kurt and Richie fall on their own. Let's not be stupid here. They all know what happened. Your thoughts on that comment?
Well, also, and they're in a league. They have contracts. They're trying to either further their career here or elsewhere. So a lot of people are going to want to stay out of that.
Protecting their jobs,
exactly.
For sure.
Rightfully so, and I think that to me, but the thing is, though, if they're speaking so candidly about these issues like this, that just says too much. There's too much. When there's smoke, there's fire, and at this point, I think the whole club is ablazing.
Big time. And I think that from the beginning, once again, the handling of how everything went down, I think the Revs botched it completely. And I think if things were a little cleaner, I don't know how it's easy to clean things up in that situation. If things kind of flowed a little bit easier at that point when stuff was unfolding, it might have not been this way, because there was just too much uncertainty. And I think it was for the players, it was for some of the coaches, it was obviously for the fan base. And you get that press conference that we get, and it's baloney talk. There's not many answers, and you're like, "What are they doing?
Well,
what's happening?"
Well, here's my thing.
It was confusing, and
and
then
the
the way
fact
that
that-
the way that they brought the coaches out at the timing that they did,
And the way that
weird.
it was all handled so publicly and right to the league. Omar makes the point where he says, like, why couldn't this be handled internally? If it was this big of an issue, why weren't we informed of what was happening at all?
So, from what I know, allegedly, Richie and Kurt went to someone with the Crafts after the San Luis game and told them that they were going to the league. They said that what they were doing to the Crafts, and then they were going to go to the league. And that's how it played out. And that's when Bruce got suspended a couple of days later. Could it have been handled in-house? Well, let me ask you this question. Did they try to handle it in-house?
Well, I don't think
Because
they
another
did.
thing that I've heard is that Bruce was sent to the principal's office a couple of times to get his wrist slapped. And nothing was really done about it. Now to you, Andy, what could the Revs have done differently if the league takes over? I mean, if you're Brian Bolello, because that's the one guy I'm back and forth on, and I'm truly conflicted how to hold him responsible on this. Because if the league takes over and this becomes a workplace issue, legally, what can he do?
No, and that's a good point because the league got involved right away. That's their thing. That's their jurisdiction. But I think probably internally there wasn't any transparency with the team, with the players, and I think that's what started that, because it's like, all right, Bruce gets suspended. I think if I don't know what happens behind those closed doors, but be like, hey, this is what's going on. This is how we're gonna move forward. I think there was just a lot of back and forth, and also then when they kind of make a decision of, all right, this is who we're gonna have take over, that backfires on them. So it's hard to handle any situation under pressure, sure, but I also think that they did not really put it all in perspective
But did the league
with the
put
players.
a gag order on them?
And that's the other part. The league could have been like, hey, we can't, certain things can't happen,
It's an investigation,
for sure it's an investigation, but I think once the fallout started, to me, it was more reactionary, which it seems like this is what's been happening the whole time, to things getting out there, to the Athletic putting the information out there, to, oh, now we have to have a press conference, now we have to do this. I think there was a lot of missteps in that process that everything led up to that moment, or to this moment rather.
I really just do think it's going to be hard. I think there's a way out for Bolello, and the only way out really is to get rid of Kurt and Richie.
Yeah, you got to clean house.
You just got to clean house. I think you were hamstrung in many ways by the league. I think you have to separate. If you really, really, really care about yourself, your job, I think you just got to be selfish here, Brian. There's no point in saving these guys. There's just not. There's no upside. These guys on this roster do not want anything to do with Kurt or Richie. And you know what? Are they going to want to play for a guy that's hired by Kurt Analfo? There's nothing to suggest right now that Kurt Analfo is not going to be the new sporting director, a.k.a. GM. And how many of those guys are going to want to play for a guy that is anointed by Kurt, who, by the way, is a failed MLS coach in himself?
Well,
Damn.
I mean, I've never owned a team, but if I'm speaking for ownership and I'm looking at what's going on right now, if I'm the Crafts and people high up, you can't obviously what happened on the field. You have to not like what happened off the field even more. And in order to move things forward, I mean, you have a player on your team giving 6.5 minutes of this immediately after the season's over. You have to know that there is an overarching problem here, way beyond the concept of just trying to keep people and move forward. So you have to, I think, do something that drastic in order to keep the players here. The players are the ones that clearly are affected, and the ones that are out there that have to perform, and they've been hampered by this entire process of what's happening off the field. So you have to do that.
And like Tom has been saying really the whole season and even today, is all that has an effect. Like, you may have a better audience yesterday if Bruce is there. You may have a better turnout if Bruce is there. You may have you have a lot of.
I was told it's all smoke and mirrors, and it was a mirage.
And during the season, it's hard to to equate that, because you're trying to analyze what's happening on the field more so than anything. But it was evident, like they've been starting to say, that was the start of the finish, basically. And you can't get away from the fact that just plays the factor in, all because the team is talented and everybody knows that the potential is there, but you have to make a drastic decision, like you're saying, if you're Bolello, and sometimes it's a hard decision to make, but it's the right one to make, and I think it's a no-brainer.
I don't think it's hard. I think this is the right one. You got to do it now.
You have to do what's right for the players, and what's right for the players is to move away from what just happened for the last 3 months.
A cantankerous environment. Which clip do you want to play next? I'll let you pick. Wants to stay. Differences with Bruce.
Well, because Omar talks a little bit about wanting to stay in New England. He likes it here. He likes the area. He likes playing for the club. But he does talk a little bit about how mentioned.
Bruce there was one voice. It goes back to it being a dictatorship. It was one voice in there, Bruce Arena, and that made everything easier. You're not hearing things from and this comes up in the clip, but I pretty much asked Omar, was Clint making the decisions, or was this where the roster and the starting lineups was coming from Kurt? Which, by the way, that's what I'm hearing.
Or, I mean, not last night. It was coming from the players, too.
More from the players, a little bit more collaborative.
To your point about the coach and the word of the dictatorship, like as a player, you play for coaches that you love, you play for coaches that you like, you play for coaches that you don't like. But at the end of the day, that voice, you know that you're following that voice, whether you like it or not. That was my point earlier, and I think you heard that with Omar, and all of us have made that today, that when it's coming from all these different areas, it's just very difficult to figure out what the line is, what the vision is, what are we doing here.
And Steve, could you try the fourth clip?
What Seth was setting up there is the relationship of, did you need to fire Dave and Showery when you got rid of, or do you think the club needed to fire Dave and Showery when Bruce is gone? And that obviously goes back to the Athletic reports where Tom Bogert and Paul Mara had it first, where there were incidents where Showery and Richie were physically restrained from each other. I can tell you that confirmed from a couple of people that Richie started yelling one day at Bruce, Dave, and Showery after training, and demanded that they get into his office so they could work out an issue. And Bruce looks at Richie and goes, "Who the F are you?" So Richie had an inferiority complex. Richie had anger issues. Nobody talked about it. Here's the other thing that hasn't come out yet. Bruce was trying to get Richie a job. And you got a little bit of a taste of it in the Athletic story. But Richie was supposed to get the Hartford Athletic job. So it's not like Bruce was leaving Richie hanging high and out to dry. You just weren't coaching on this team, and you probably weren't coaching in MLS. And maybe USL was a good place to go rehab your image. Now you can't go anywhere. So Richie was a problem. I think, personally, when it boils down to it, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 guys on the coaching staff. 1, maybe 2, depending on the day, are an issue. Maybe it's not them. Maybe it's you.
Interesting. I mean, that's usually when there's a common denominator. Usually, that's the case.
And that's tough to hear too. Just to expand on what I was saying earlier, and Andy, you know this playing and covering the league too. That when you there's quarrels that happen all the time in any workplace. But if this is happening on a consistent basis, that's again as a player, you're going to just start questioning things even more. You're going to look over at the sideline, see these guys allegedly doing what they were doing, being like, what's going on here right now? What am I a part of? What are we working toward?
I certainly question Richie's character. He presents one thing on the surface when you talk to him with the media, but there was he had to have power. Clearly, he didn't like the succession plan. I don't know how true this is, but the succession plan wasn't Richie Williams was going to be the next head coach. Dave Vandenberg was going to be the next head coach, not Richie. That's speculation from people around and close to the situation. But it wasn't. But that's part of the problem that Richie had. Was he wasn't going to be the guy, and he couldn't handle that. So,
damn shame.
Tough.
So we're left with this.
What a sport.
We're left with guys that I think will be very vocal if Richie and Kurt are on the payroll for 2024. There is no way Brian Bolello, and if he allows it, then he's part of the problem. There is no way.
As it stands right now, you're not holding him necessarily accountable for really.
As of right now, it's hard for me to hold Bolello accountable.
Put in a tough spot.
Because I think the league forced this. Now, again, playing devil's advocate, which is what I tend to do from time to time, or play both sides of the argument.
Yeah, that never happens.
I think Bolello should have also gone out there and tried to save the hire that probably saved his job. Keep in mind, when they blew it all up in 2019 and Friedel's gone and Burns is gone, who didn't get axed at the time? Brian Bolello, the loyal soldier for the Kraft family, going back to when Bolello was the CFO of the Patriots. Okay? So he's got tenure there. And in my opinion, I give the Bruce hiring, and I could be wrong in this, credit to Bolello because I don't think the Krafts had any care who was going to take over after Friedel. I think Bolello wanted Arena in here. He knew he was available. So that's where I say, why don't you go out there and defend the guy more? Again, you might be hamstrung by the situation, but there were places I do think he could have done more. But at the end of the day, in the grand scheme of things, of all the players that are involved here, Kurt and Richie are paramount to what is the problem.
And let me put this out there, since we're speculating. If there is to be a clean house, Richie's gone, Kurt's gone, right? The players are clearly unhappy. They haven't been out. They can't come out and say it directly, but it's been we've seen enough to understand.
I think we just heard enough.
Is the door completely closed for Dave, for Shari to come back to the Revolution? Maybe Bruce at this point, but is the door completely closed for them to come back? Because
Shari's not going to want to come back.
They're the issue. But if the issue is gone, if the issue is with Richie and it's with Kurt, primarily Richie, and they're gone, and Bolello reaches out the olive branch and says, hey, man, you guys got to understand we were put in a tough spot. They're familiar with this club. They know these guys, and those guys clearly liked playing for them.
Or is there too much that's happened?
There could be, but
have to just cut.
But we've seen it in so many different ways in different sports that it's a business, and at the end of the day, people are going to do what's best for them.
Andy could tell you, going back to 2013, when Shallery Joseph was kicked out of the organization the first time, this was kind of like his second chance, right? And Shallery didn't necessarily do anything to get himself kicked out of the organization this time. But if I'm Shallery, I go wherever Bruce goes. I would keep an eye on Dave. I think Dave Vandenberg's interviewing for jobs, personally. I mean, I think they're both interviewing for jobs. One of those two are going to be a head coach. My money would be on Dave. If they're talking about Dave being the replacement for Bruce here, he's probably going out there and interviewing at other places.
He doesn't turn down the job if it's offered to him, though, I don't think.
No, because they had the plan.
Right. So that's the point. That was the question I was asking. I was like, this doesn't necessarily close the door on these.
Well, I think it closes the door on them here. Yes, absolutely. I don't think they want anything to do with this organization unless everybody goes, including Bolello.
Okay. Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, I probably agree with that. I mean, I think that the damage is it happened, and you kind of the way everything unfolded, you don't want to walk back into a situation like this. One, and two, we just saw another MLS coach get fired today. Like there's a lot of coaching jobs in MLS right now.
I think Chicago's open.
Yes.
DC's
There's
open. Charlotte's open.
Colorado.
Is Austin open?
No. Josh Wolf is staying.
Colorado's open, right?
Colorado should be or will be.
Who just got signed yesterday?
Montreal's open.
Montreal's open. Lasada's out.
This league.
Toronto's open, right?
No. They got John Herdman.
Okay.
The Canadian international.
But there is a lot of openings, and there's a lot. There's
going to be a place for those guys.
Yeah,
Let's put it like that. There's a place for Bruce. There is going to be an MLS club that will take the call from Bruce Arena.
Absolutely.
Especially if people are willing to tell their stories.
Yeah, because there's going to eventually something more is going to be known, and that process of like the appeal with MLS, when things kind of come to public light, then it's going to be interesting to see if Bruce is in this process and interviewing actually interested, and there's mutual interest. How do they react and what could they do? Because if it was so egregious, like, do you let him back in the league? Or if it wasn't that egregious, then all right, cool.
Well, that's the other thing. Did Bruce say something worse than what Kai Wagner said to Bobby Wood? Was Bruce more racially abusive than Kai Wagner was, using a racial slur against Asians? Is that what we're saying here? Major League Soccer?
Ooh. Flip it on him.
I mean, think about it. Think about it. We were left with speculation. We're still left with speculation because the league has no transparency here, that Bruce made inappropriate and insensitive comments. We have an incident of proven racial, a racial slur being used. And that is only warranted of a 3-game suspension. And granted, Philadelphia moves on. Kai Wagner is playing in the MLS at the Eastern Conference Finals.
Potentially game 3. Well, no, is it a 3-game series now?
It's
Going forward,
done.
it's not. Yeah,
I know it's
Oh,
tough.
it's
hard to follow.
It's tough to keep up with all the new rules for playoffs, but yeah,
Good
now
grief.
it's 1 and
So
done.
it'll change next
And
year.
there's overtime, by the way.